Welcome to this explainer. We swipe, we click, we connect, we completely take our access to the global digital world for granted. But what happens when that connection is just abruptly severed? And not just for a couple of hours, but for months on end. Today, we're bypassing the usual headlines to dive straight into a deeply fascinating and frankly staggering reality. We're looking at a report from Euronews about an ongoing digital crisis that is fundamentally reshaping Iranian society right now.
82. Just wrap your head around that number for a second. That is exactly how many days the country has been plunged into an internet blackout. And this isn't just some technical glitch. This shutdown kicked off roughly an hour after a joint U.S.-Israeli strike on Iran back on February 28th. Now sure, we've seen blackouts used before during countrywide protests, but as this particular shutdown stretches past the 82-day mark, it's evolved into something entirely different. It's actually unprecedented in how it's being structured.
So the crucial point we're going to explore today is how this blackout hasn't just disconnected a nation, it's actually created a rigid, class-based digital society. We aren't just talking about people temporarily losing their social media feeds or cat videos, we're looking at a systemic restructuring of who actually gets to participate in the modern digital economy and who gets left entirely in the dark.
Okay, let's look at the actual architecture of this digital divide. Because the internet in Tehran right now isn't just a simple off-or-on switch, it's layered into three very distinct tiers. Think of it like a VIP club. At the very top, you have the white internet. This is the totally unfiltered access, but it's reserved exclusively for senior Islamic Republic officials and a select few journalists approved by the Ministry of Culture. Then, right in the middle, you have Internet Pro. And at the very bottom, ordinary citizens who are granted virtually no access to global platforms whatsoever. It is literally a digital caste system.
Now, what's super interesting is that middle tier, Internet Pro. The state markets it as this stable internet, but the reality is the restrictions are incredibly tight. It grants highly restricted profession-based access. So if you're an approved academic, a lawyer, or a doctor, you might qualify. But even then, you're capped at fewer than 10 international platforms. Telegram and WhatsApp? Sure, they might be stable, but you can pretty much forget about reliably loading up Instagram, YouTube, or X. And it's hyper-specific. Doctors are basically limited just to WhatsApp, while university lecturers are confined to academic databases like Google Scholar. Essentially, the internet you get depends entirely on the job you do.
Which, of course, brings us to the steep price of access. For anyone left out of those top two tiers, getting online suddenly becomes an incredibly expensive hurdle. If you're one of the privileged few on the official Internet Pro tier, your access costs roughly 20 euro cents per gigabyte. But for ordinary citizens who are forced to rely on commercially available VPNs just to scrape together basic connectivity, the cost absolutely skyrockets. They're paying upwards of 12 times as much as the government's official rate.
And this isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. This is real life. Take Ali Reza, a 40-year-old cafe owner in Tehran. He doesn't qualify for Internet Pro. So he's out there spending roughly 15 million tomans, which is about 75 euros a month, just to buy one single gigabyte of daily VPN access. Remember, he used to have unlimited browsing for his business. As Ali Reza puts it, in which country does using the internet cost this much? Just because there's a war on, should the Iranian people be deprived of the internet? It perfectly highlights the immense frustration of ordinary folks who are completely priced out of the digital age.
And that personal financial strain cascades into a billion-dollar blackout.
Beyond those personal struggles, the macroeconomic toll of this tiered system is just mind-blowing. When you pull the plug on a modern economy, the financial bleeding happens fast. According to the head of the Blockchain Commission at the National IT Guild, damages hit an astounding $1 billion in just the first 50 days of the shutdown. At its worst, this blackout is bleeding up to $35 million every single day. That's direct losses, lost profits, and a total paralyzation of digital trade.
This is the ground zero of the economic fallout. Think about the informal retail traders, the small shop owners, the independent businesses that entirely relied on platforms like Instagram to sell their goods and reach customers. They don't qualify for Internet Pro, they certainly can't afford those skyrocketing VPN costs, so their livelihoods have essentially been frozen in time. And it's not just the small informal traders feeling the pain either. Even the massive players in the market are buckling under this. Digikala, which is one of Iran's absolute largest e-commerce platforms, has been forced to lay off staff because of heavily reduced turnover. Former newspaper editor Mansour Bitaf noted that by mid-May, the shutdown had caused businesses 16.3 trillion tomans in lost profits. To put that into perspective, that's about 181 million euros, and that is without even counting the indirect losses.
So how is the government responding?
Well, let's look at words versus actions.
This immense economic and social fallout brings us to a really glaring contradiction in the political messaging. Officially, the stance is one of sympathy. Government spokesperson Fatima Mahajirani insists that the administration and President Masoud Pezeshkian specifically actually oppose internet discrimination. She stated they are actively trying to untie the knots around the internet to create a fairer situation, and even claimed that Internet Pro was never intended to be a general solution for citizens.
But critics are quick to point out a pretty massive structural contradiction here. While the government officially states it opposes internet discrimination, President Pezeshkian simultaneously chairs the Supreme National Security Council. And why does that matter? Because that is the exact body that approved this discriminatory Internet Pro tiered system in the first place. For critics, this makes the stated opposition seem largely symbolic.
Highlighting this exact tension, former economic newspaper editor Mansour Bataf actually took a stand. He flat out refused to hand over his personal phone number to get that elite tier access. He argued impartially that giving internet to some while denying it to others is a blatant violation of basic public rights. It's a powerful moral argument that really strikes at the heart of this entire digital divide.
Which brings us to our final thought today. As this blackout stretches past 82 days with absolutely no clear end date in sight, we have to ask ourselves, what is the lasting impact on a society when the digital world becomes an exclusive club rather than a universal right? What happens when politicians and doctors can connect, but cafe owners and retail workers are left completely in the dark? It is a sobering look at the true power of connectivity. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.